Oh, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. BHN for your, is it Tuesday? Tuesday night. G'day, George.
G'day. Good evening. Kia ora,
G'day, good
how are
evening,
we?
good afternoon. Kia ora. Yeah, good, mate. Hey, just for people who have already been messaging me through the day, COVID hasn't hit yet. So I'm on watch. Just for people who don't know, I'm on watch. Had some exposure on Sunday morning potentially, so we're on watch, and we're still doing okay. We're still doing okay. Right, tonight's show actually kind of dovetails quite nicely into last night's show, because last night's show we talked a little bit about David Seymour and an interview he had on Newstalk ZB based on their announcements in the weekend of their 100-day plan. So that was a conversation we had last night. Today, journalist Simon Wilson has written an article in the New Zealand Herald titled David Seymour Stoking the Fires of a Culture War. And Simon's actually going to be joining us, and we're going to have a chat about his article and maybe some other things that come up. The other thing we're going to do today is Christopher Luxon, National's hairless leader, was on Newstalk ZB. That's just a little light-hearted prod. There's nothing serious about that. Was on Newstalk ZB with Kerre. I was going to say, when I used to work there, she was Woodham, and then she was McIvor, and now she's Woodham again. So not sure which is the correct name, but we'll go with Kerre Woodham on Newstalk ZB for about an hour today. And there was a few interesting things that we pulled out of that, and we'll have a look at. And also, speaking of all of this, it kind of wraps it all up at the end from Today FM. Tova O'Brien actually did some commentary yesterday morning. It's one of the things we were going to get to last night's show, but kind of ran short of time, where she was talking about shooting the messenger. And that so often in commentary or in journalism, you get attacked when you put out a message that a particular political bias doesn't like, even if the next day the political analysis you're doing kind of is one that the other side doesn't like. And for those of us who have been doing this for a while, we could probably ask Simon about this as well. I used to get this at Newstalk ZB, where one night I'd be a voice piece of Helen Clark, and then the next week, very next night, I'd be like a conservative right-wing trope or whatever. And it basically, the piece that she talks about is don't shoot the messenger. And what she's basically saying is, it's not, maybe it's not necessarily us. If we offer an opinion or an analysis that doesn't sit with your ideology, that doesn't mean that we're trying to further the opposition to that ideology's perspective. It just means that in this instance, we're offering this perspective and about what's going on in this instance. So it kind of wraps up quite nicely, because we are talking a bit about the media today with Simon Wilson first, and then Kerre Woodham second, and then Tova third. So that's us. Anything else we got to kick off with there, George, before we bring Simon in?
No, it's all good.
Remember, if you're new to us, and I think there's been a few tweets going out tonight that we're talking to Simon, so there may be some new people here, you can interact with us by quite simply chatting with us in the chat, whether it's something nice like Kim just saying hi and good evening all, or whether it's more highbrow, not that that's highbrow, I mean lowbrow, analysis or questions or whatever. And we often get a lot of messages coming in. We don't get a chance to get to all of them. But if you're new here, you're more than welcome to share your thoughts in the chat, and we will endeavor to share them. You know what? It's so funny when you talk about the idea. If there's an echo, I'm sorry, dude. I'm not hearing what I'm listening, and my other speakers are down. So anyway, okay. I nearly said the Newstalk ZB phone number. I haven't worked there for 12 years, but I nearly said if you want to communicate, I nearly said the number out loud because it just gets stuck in your head. Okay, from the New Zealand Herald, journalist Simon Wilson joins us. Simon, good evening to you, sir. We haven't got you. We can't hear you there, Simon. Maybe your mic just needs to be clicked on. That's mic off. That's mic on. No, we haven't got you. George, can you hear Simon at all? No, we haven't got you. Sorry, Simon, we haven't got you coming through. So if what you want to, probably the easiest thing to do sometimes with our computer systems here, Simon, they glitch a little bit. So if you just disconnect altogether and then reconnect, and then we'll see if you get in, this time, and we'll chat to you. So completely get out of the waiting room, Simon, disconnect yourself altogether, and then come back in, and hopefully we'll be all up and operating and chatting. So what we'll do while we wait for Simon to come back and join us in a lovely, lovely way is actually have a look at the article and have a look at what the article had to say, and then we'll see if we can grab Simon and bring him in. So the article was titled David Seymour, Stoking the Fires of a Culture War. I'll read out a bit of it that I've highlighted here, talking specifically about the idea around what Simon was saying, and then we'll get Simon to fill us in on some more of the details. So David Seymour was at the ACT Party conference over the weekend, and I was going to think of the word, the hypothesis, the ideas that the thesis that Simon was putting out there, that David Seymour is stirring up racial hatred and cannot be aware of that. He says this: Seymour's complaint, and this is about, for example, the new Māori Health Authority or Three Waters reform. Seymour's complaint is not a dog whistle; it's an unmistakable clarion call to everyone who thinks Māori are getting too much. Ethno-states, because that's what David Seymour calls them. New Zealand is becoming an ethno-state. So Simon says, ethno-states promote the idea that their true citizens share a history, culture, and ethnicity, and because of it, belong to a superior race. Almost always they defend their status with the brutal oppression of others. Myanmar, with its genocide of the, you'll have to forgive me that word, Rohingya, is an ethno-state. China is too. It's killing, enslavement, torture, mass rape, and forced sterilization of Uyghurs also amount to genocide. Apartheid South Africa was an ethno-state, as was Nazi Germany. So the point, I guess, that Simon's making is when David Seymour calls New Zealand an ethno-state or becoming an ethno-state, he's comparing it to those examples of what is an ethno-state. Let's try again with Simon. Simon, are you with us? No, we haven't got you. Sorry, Simon. I'm sorry, we haven't got you through on the thing there. All I can suggest is maybe trying one more time and seeing if your mic is on. When you come into that first window, which shows yourself on the screen, make sure the mic levels are going up and down. And if they're not, you're going to have to try and tutu with your settings to accept your mic altogether. But we'll give you another crack and see what happens. We'll go on to what the article says from Simon. Simon goes on to talk about Bill English. Bill English has made some very interesting speeches over time. As the Prime Minister, the leader of the National Party, he made a speech on Waitangi Day in 2017 where he said, Ngāti Whātua's future is New Zealand's future. And Simon says he didn't mean that as a platitude. He was pointing specifically to the economic and cultural importance of iwi to the whole country. I would say that almost without exception, the organisation that are most committed to the development are the local iwi. Whānau Ora, he said, represents the best and truest chance of the next 20 to 30 years. I'm going to go one more time with Simon. Fingers crossed all together here, people. Here we go. Simon, good evening to you. I was going to leave Simon there, and he can tussle away while we're still reading some more of his bits and pieces. Simon goes on in his article talking about Bill English and talking about what he actually had to say in that Waitangi Day speech. He said, much as we have good intentions, this is Bill English speaking, the truth is we have not met our aspirations, he said. These things are a sign of failure. He meant the failure of existing government agencies and of society at large. Whānau Ora had been the essential prototype for Māori agency over Māori lives. Te aka whaora we build on. Any luck there, Simon? No, I can't hear you, unfortunately. And there's nothing on this end, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on or what we're going to do. What we could possibly do is, if you wanted to, Simon, you could call me on my cell phone. We'll put you on speakerphone and we'll put you up to the microphone, and then we can have a chat that way. It'll be a bit different and a bit unique, but we want to get your thoughts. And so if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to. I will pick up and we will talk to you that way, and we can see your beautiful face and hear your beautiful voice on the cell phone. My cell phone number's at the bottom of those emails that I sent you. Do that and we'll have a chat and we'll just see how it goes. This is just live internet-based, I was going to say radio, broadcasting from time to time. As for ACT, says Simon, it didn't used to have a problem with co-governance. In 2010, it supported the creation of the Waikato River Authority, the body that exercises co-governance between the Crown and the 5 iwi of the Waikato River catchment. It works well, enjoys, and there we go. We'll just put that. I'll put you there for a second, Simon. Just stick with us, and I'll finish reading this article. The co-governance between the Crown and the 5 iwi of the Waikato River catchment. It works well, enjoys the support of the Waikato Regional Council, Dairy NZ, landowners, and many others. And gosh, it administers water. And in 2014, ACT voted for the Tūhoe Claim Settlement Act and Te Urewera Act, setting up to co-governance between Ngāti Tūhoe and the Crown in Te Urewera. Notably, though, New Zealand First was opposed, Seymour knows that there are votes to win among the grumpy folk who don't want to hear the word Aotearoa, so he's happy to stoke the fires of a culture war. And we welcome via phone Simon Wilson. Good evening, Simon.
Good evening to you, Pat.
Good to have you with us. Happy to see you.
Yeah, but I'm getting an echo now.
Well, you probably will, because it'll probably be coming through your headphones and coming back again altogether. But I can hear you. George, you've got headphones on. Can you hear Simon okay?
Yeah, well, good.
You're all good. Okay, let's just go there.
Yep. So we'll go this way. We'll have a quick chat. We've kind of synopsized your whole article there, Simon. Hopefully you're okay with that. So why don't we just throw it to you and say, what more do you want to add to what you wrote about ACT and about David Seymour's, as you say, sort of racist statements?
Well, I thought you picked out a couple of the really key things there, Pat. First off, when people use phrases like ethno states, they're not asking us to simply think, gosh, this is just a state about has things gone too far. What they're trying to do is say there are horrendous examples of terrible state repression that we have in our history, and New Zealand in the same situation as those. And I gave the examples of China with the Uyghurs and Myanmar with the Rohingya and so on, and Nazi Germany, of course. David Seymour's not doing this by accident. He is deliberately trying to say that we are facing a situation in this country where Māori are going to oppress Pākehā in terrible ways, which, when you think about it, is just extraordinary. If there is a parallel in New Zealand at the moment, it's nothing to do with that. Māori miss out on every social index you can think of, and always have.
Hey, Simon, sorry to interrupt you, but can I suggest, if your speakers are on your computer, just mute your computer, and then you'll probably only be able to hear us through your phone, just in case.
How's that now?
Perfect. There you go. No feedback.
Yeah, good. All right. Yeah, sorry about that.
No. It's no problem.
And then, I was going to say the other thing you did, which I thought was tremendous, you quoted the bits I had of quoting Bill English. Yeah, I was at the Ngāti Whātua Marae Waitangi Day 2017 when he made that speech, and he talked about how important Ngāti Whātua had been. He said something really extraordinary for a National Party Prime Minister. He said that the Ngāti Whātua history of protest had been extremely important in the development of relations between Māori and Pākehā in this country. And of course, he was talking there about Bastion Point. His own party had been the party who had run Ngāti Whātua off Bastion Point back in 1978. But he was saying that's how history progresses. And I thought that was a brave thing for him to do. But then he went on to talk about whānau ora. He talked about how arrangements that the state makes with Māori providers in partnerships and in co-governance are going to be critical for how we progress as a nation. It's not something that we need to be frightened about. It's something that we can embrace and work to everybody's advantage. And I thought, when people like Bill English, who was National Party Prime Minister at the time, are saying things like that, something's really shifted in this country. And the other thing I guess I said in my column was we could see the result of that shift at Matariki. Matariki was I think widely embraced in New Zealand as a really exciting thing to do, a winter festival that was about families, it was about food, it was about culture, it was about, it wasn't a commercial festival. Who knows what it'll become one day, but it certainly wasn't this year. And I think people really responded to that and went, yeah, this is us. This is an Indigenous festival that we can all be part of. And this is the country we're really pleased to be living in.
Yeah, you put out a tweet today as well, and I'll just bring it up about, you actually did it just a while ago talking about this show, but you said so many great responses to our NZ Herald column today about David Seymour and racism, ho, 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 and some weird stuff too. Do you want to give us a bit of a idea about some of the feedback that you have had? What's been going on today with this article? Because I've seen it all over the place.
Yeah, and I have too. And the thing that's been really pleasing to me is that there have been so many people who've come back to me and gone, gosh, thanks for saying that, and that was terrific, and being very supportive. But I've also had some people who've said, why doesn't everybody understand that if we simply leave race out of the question, we're all going to get along fine? And, it sounds like a nice idea. The problem with it is that if you've got people who have systematically been doing worse in every social index on the basis of their race, you've got to look at it in a colonial way. You've got to say, well, why is that? And how are we going to front up to the fact that that's the system we've got now that has created that? And what are we going to change? And then, of course, there's been a bunch of people who've gone, how dare you? David Seymour is the only person who's prepared to speak the truth. And I'm just a paid, because I work for a large media company that is funded in small part by the Public Interest Journalism Fund.
Yeah.
I am just a paid stooge of the government. And can I just say the Public Interest Journalism Fund doesn't pay my salary and doesn't influence policy at the Herald or Newstalk ZB, which is also the same company, NZME, or any of the rest of us. It pays for some Māori and Pacifica and Indian and other cadets to get a taste of journalism. And that's all it's doing. And in particular, a taste of journalism in relation to stories not only about their communities, but about local councils and things like that, which don't get reported. And it's an extraordinary thing to me that people are upset that this is happening.
Well, the other thing is, and we say this quite a lot, Simon, and forgive me, I'm not saying this for your benefit because I know you get it, but I like to, as much as we can without sounding arrogant, lead people to water. We want to lead the horse to water, give them the information. We can't force them to drink, but we want to, that's sort of one of the hearts behind what we're doing here. And what we often say with David Seymour, and I've actually said this to him, right? Well, I've had him on and I said this to him about the whole kind of racist connotations behind what he's saying. And it's not that he wants equality or everyone to be treated the same. It's that he only wants people to be treated the same under the heading of race. Right, that's the only place he wants them treated the same. Because when I had him on, I was talking about, well, what about those special car parks that the disabled people get? That's actually discriminatory against me. And his response was, well, yeah, of course, because they need them. And I'm like, yeah, but if this group of people in the health system need it, and it happens to be a race of people, what's different? Which, of course, he didn't have an answer for. But what I've actually done is pulled something out. And I've done I want to use this, Simon, because I spent 2 minutes making a little graph or a little slide. We've got to use our little slide. And to demonstrate this to people, what I've done is I've changed one of the words in what he said. And then you can see either the first example is ludicrous or the second example, he's a hypocrite. It can only be one of those two things. So let me put it up. On Newstalk ZB yesterday, he was talking about the health system. And that's obviously a statement based on race. He said this: are we really saying that there are two different types of New Zealanders with completely different health needs and two parallel healthcare systems in such a sparsely populated country? Right now, he's talking about two different health systems, which is not actually what we're talking about, but based on race. However, he's also an advocate for charter schools, right?
Yeah.
So what if we just change the word health to education? And now the statement says, are we really saying that there are two different types of New Zealanders with completely different education needs and two parallel education systems in New Zealand in such a sparsely populated country? Now, he supports the second one. In fact, he was complaining on Newstalk ZB yesterday that Labour threw out the charter schools, which was an ACT policy. And he supports two parallel education systems, but he's against two parallel healthcare systems, which is not actually what it is. It's not two parallel healthcare systems. But as soon as you put a different discriminatory group in with what he's saying, I'll say it again, the reason it's either racist or comes off at racist or whatever is the correct terminology to use is it's not that he wants equality based on race. It's that all he wants is equality based on race. Any other area, he's happy for legal discrimination. He's happy for it based on age. He's happy for it based on disability, all those areas in the Human Rights Commission that are discriminatory. He'll happily do those and happily, stand up for discrimination based on age. 65-year-olds can get a pension, 45-year-olds can't. But when it comes to race, he has to have everyone the same. And that's why it comes off as racist, because it's the only area that he cares about.
I think that's right. One of the misconceptions about the ACT Party is that it's an ideological party. They like to present that idea themselves, that there are underlying principles that they operate from, and therefore they have this policy or that policy. But you just pointed out a very glaring anomaly in relation to that. It's much more opportunist in relation to health because you can play the race card. The ACT Party is another example. The ACT Party is opposed to zoning for schools. David Seymour represents the Epsom electorate, which is essentially the grammar zone in Auckland, and he supports the grammar zone being retained in Auckland. It doesn't follow in any sense from ACT philosophy, but it's just an opportunist way of saying, well, I need these votes. And that's the larger question here. We've got an election coming next year. Seymour has recognised that there is a bunch of New Zealanders who are grumpy and feel disaffected, and they used to vote for Winston Peters, and their votes are up for grabs. Peters may get some of them back, but quite possibly not a lot, and Seymour's after all of them. So if you look at the voting record of ACT in Parliament, when all the parties in Parliament say we need better gun control laws after the Christchurch massacre, ACT says not so fast. So they soak up some votes from that. When all the parties say we're going to have the zero carbon bill, ACT says no, we're not. That's ridiculous, and they soak up some votes from that. And the reforms in the health system, the reforms over waters over the sea waters are similar again. It's where is this country heading in general? Isn't it amazing that there's actually a consensus about a lot of these things, but there are still some people who are going to be pissed off about it, so we'll go for them. And that's what they are, and I think they need to be called that again and again and again.
The other thing about this conversation to do with what he said yesterday, just to show the lunacy of what they're talking about. And when I say lunacy, I guess I'm talking about sort of unintelligent rhetoric that hasn't been thought through, that can fall over with one example, is he's talking about two types of New Zealanders with completely different health needs. Well, how about male and female? So do you know what I mean? It's like if you can just drive a truck through an argument that easily, then it's a pretty shitty argument. We do have different health needs for different people. What he's just saying is you can't have it based on race. Even if based on race, there are some obvious needs in that area. He's happy to say have different healthcare for male and female, but not for Māori and Pākehā, not for Asian and Pākehā, or whatever it is. I guess it's Māori and Pākehā because it's what we're talking about. But it's just, I get angry because I feel like people don't get the opportunity to think it through. It's like when you kind of show people like that what's happening, I mean, I don't want to sound arrogant, but I struggle to find a hole in that argument that people can say, no, that's not what it's about. It's only about someone wanting to play the race card, to have kind of race and racist tropes, and to, as you say, sop up some of those grumpy voters that don't want to hear the word Aotearoa. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do, and I think if you think about the last 2.5 years now almost of COVID, there's a lot of things that the lessons are very hard to learn. It's been a really complex thing, and we can't learn all those lessons yet because we don't have enough information and things still unfolding. But one of the things that became really clear in 2020 was that the way in which our health system ordinarily functioned, particularly discriminated in the public health area against Māori and Pacifica. They were the people much more adversely affected by COVID in those early months than the rest of the population. And it's not because it was a virus that particularly attacked those ethnicities. It was because of the way in which people lived. The health system was not geared to cope with a pandemic in those communities, and particularly in South Auckland. We clearly learned from that we need to reform that system so we don't have pandemics in the future causing as much havoc as COVID has done. I don't see how that could be at all controversial. And yet, ACT and National, for that matter, are both saying, no, this is the wrong time to reform the health system, and the way in which it's being done is wrong. It's not the wrong time. It's actually the essential time to do it. There's no more important time to do it than now. And there is no more important thing to do in it than to throw a bigger focus on public health. And in the context of doing that, to say, as Bill English said, what was it, 5 years ago now, to say, what are the Māori service providers that we can enable in order to do this well? There is nothing more to it than that, and I don't see how anyone rationally could oppose it.
Hey, finally, Simon, and thank you for staying with us, even though there's a few technical glitches there. This was David Seymour's response to your article. He responded by saying, I mean, Labour is creating distinctions in laws that treat people differently based on their ethnicity, and that is fundamentally incompatible with democracy. But I look forward to reading what I, quote unquote, really mean from your article. But again, like, not to bang on too much about it, if you replace that word ethnicity with lots of other words, he'd be okay with it. Because there are different laws based on age. There are different laws based on gender. There are different laws based on disability. And he's okay with those differences in laws, but it's only when it comes to race and ethnicity that has a problem. To me, that's why it comes across as a racially charged statement, if not fully racist, as you basically said in your article. And before I give you the last word there, if you haven't seen this yourself, there are some pretty good responses in here. It's quite a fun read.
That graphic of people standing on the boxes, I think that's one of the great visual representations of a society and what this whole debate is about. What does equality mean? What does equity mean? That's so critical. The equal opportunity to see the game and not just to be there behind the fence. So it's so important. And when you go back to that question of race and co-governance and acts, there have been in the previous 10, 15 years some really significant developments in this country. One of them was the way in which Te Urewera is now co-governed between Tuhoi and the Crown. Another one is the way in which the Waikato River is co-governed through the Waikato River Authority between the 5 tribes of the river and the Crown. Those were both laws passed by the national government and supported at the time by ACT. Both of them, those laws prior to David Seymour coming along, but nevertheless supported by ACT. This is not a long-standing position that ACT has had in opposing these things. These are ways in which the country is evolving to on a more equitable basis. ACT used to be in support of them, but because there are votes in it now, it's not.
All right, Simon. Hey, look, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. We completely want to have you again. Maybe we'll connect at some stage this week and test the mics out and make sure we've got a system that works out. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for giving us a little bit of time today, and we appreciate you being for a first time on Big Hairy News.
Oh, thank you.
Very good. All right, let's now I've got to figure out how to do all of this stuff. I'll hang that up. I'm sorry, and I've got to turn my volume down because it was turned up massively loud, so we could pick up the phone, and I'll check my levels again. And well, that was different, George. That was a wicked chat. I mean, I'm glad we managed to think about. I'm just starting to think maybe if we can get a telco sponsor out there, it's time to get telephone lines put in. Maybe just thinking out loud.
Well, yeah, and then we'll get some of the lovely people in chat ringing in as well.
Yeah, well, I obviously was doing 9 things at once and I was a little bit flustered to get all that working. So has there been anything in the chat that we need to really go to? I mean, look, I can see that there are some critiques and criticism. Happy to have those on there. Hopefully Reece, you're okay. Disappointed to hear from him, but we got there in the end.
Got there in the end.
Yeah,
no critiques. I think there's some base David Seymour protectors out there that
like this one here. Kotenshu. Yep, everything I agree with is disagree with is racist.
That could be you could say that about David Seymour.
Yeah.
I mean, he says the Māori Health Authority is racist, right? That's what he's saying. He's saying New Zealand is becoming an ethno-state. that person is saying exactly what David Seymour's
whether they're a Seymour supporter,
argument
obviously,
is,
which is fine. Listen, look, I haven't had necessarily criticism, and if I have, I don't care. But people are saying, oh, sure, another left-wing outlet, look at their bias. It's like, look, we're honest about where we're coming from. I do, George does as well, I guess. You can speak for yourself though, George. Sit on the left, and we have conversations that aren't being had in the media world at the moment. That doesn't mean, though, that we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And if you're someone who is just joining us tonight thinking, oh, what is this left-wing crap? Then you need to watch more, because there is quite a lot of time that we haul labour over the coals for the abysmal job they're doing in areas as well. We look at each individual. It's a little bit like we're going to go into the conversation with Tova O'Brien about don't shoot the messenger. We look at each individual situation that comes up, and we will offer our opinions on it and critique it. And I actually challenge you to find a hole in the argument that he is playing the race card, because the only area that David Seymour is looking for equality in is race. Where's my hole? Where's the hole in that argument? Now, I'm not actually telling you he shouldn't be playing the race card. If you want to support him and you want to play the race card, that's fine. But be honest. That is what he's doing.
My thing with the comparisons you made between those two things, and it's a comparison that's there to show, I guess, to sort of give evidence to the fact that there might be a racial motivation or a racial undercurrent to David Seymour's discourse and his policies. But at the same time, like when we look at that comparison, it doesn't mean that we think that well, for me anyway, it doesn't mean that there are two systems of people that need two systems of education in New Zealand. Do you know what I mean? It's like that trap that you sort of fall into if you sort of buy your logic someone. Like, by your logic, that means blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, actually, I don't agree with charter schools. So, like, it's... But I think there's still there's a distinction between those two things.
Yeah, there is. But the point that we're making is he's okay with a separate education system. In fact, he's a supporter of it. His policies for charter schools would literally do that. But he's not okay with what he calls, it's actually not a separate health system, right? But what he calls a separate health system. Now, he would argue, but there's a need. I mean, he said this to us, right? But there's a need for charter schools. That group of people might need X, Y, and Z. Well, yeah. So there's a need for different health outcomes for various groups of people based on whatever their need is. It's like this whole thing about health, like it's like standing up and going, fucking, I haven't got breast cancer. Why is there money going to breast cancer? That's not, I don't need that. I don't care. No, it should be one health system. Only one kind of cancer should be treated. Only one. It's just ludicrous. The point is always, what is the need for what group of people, whether it's race or whether it's age or whether it's disability or whatever it is. If there is a trend within a group of people that needs to be addressed, then you address it. If that group of people happens to be an ethnically similar group of people, you still address it. It's ludicrous to come out against two, if this group of people, for whatever reasons, like imagine I'm talking about breast cancer. If this group of women need something addressed with breast cancer and they're all women, then you address it. If there is a health need amongst a group of people that happen to be a race, let's say Māori, then you address it. And if that means the headline is a issue for Māori, then that's the headline. So what? It's a group of people that need an issue addressed, so address it. And I'll say again to you people who are no one in our chat is having a crack at us. It's all good, but just find the logic. Find the hole in the logic. There's a group of people that need particular help in a particular area. They
usually disagree on that premise, don't they?
But
Isn't that where they start?
Because we have maths and we have numbers and we see things
we have a history as well.
And a history, and we have things like life expectancy, and we have things like COVID rates amongst Māori and Pacific Islanders. But you can't actually, you can dispute it if you're being a dishonest player, but you can't actually dispute it if you look at the numbers, right? Whatever it is, if there is a group of people that need it, help that group of people. If that group of people happens to be in a similar or same race, then address it within that race. Conversation over. And look, I'm not the person to have this conversation now. I'm not educated enough, but if that also then ties into, guarantees that have been made to Māori under the treaty, then that's just more of a reason, because the treaty, remember, is just basically a contract between two property owners, or a new property owner and a current property owner coming together. So if that's tied in, wrong person to ask about it, if that's tied in to treaty issues and claims as well, and it's something that has been committed to, then that's just another reason to address it. Anyway, I do have water. Oh, fuck, I've got water. Brilliant. Hang on. There we go. All right. What else has been coming in recently? What does Carl have to say? Carl's a lovely regular here. Funnily enough, I didn't even pre-read Carl's because I know he's a regular and he's always got good things to say. Funny enough, the separate health argument appeared when period products were made free in schools. Where's the men's health product? That's so unfair. Yeah, well, that's it. Kind of always goes for it as well. I'm not sure. We'll see. He's advocating for increasing inequity because he and his constituents benefit from it. Yeah. I mean, I think what Simon was saying is fair to parallel, or to paraphrase, I should say, George. Simon's saying that it's purely a vote grab. It's purely a vote grab, and it's there's a sector of society that don't want to hear the word Aotearoa, and he's actively going after them. Because as the article said very clearly, there's been times where ACT have supported co-governance, but now it's advantageous for them not to get votes, so they're not. So. Anyway.
Yeah, it's totally, out there in New Zealand, it's totally not an unpopular opinion among, the working middle class in the suburbs of Christchurch that somehow Cindy is like there for the Maoris, and that means that somehow those, these white fellas are getting left behind, right? It's not an unpopular sort of, or not a rare sort of thing, even among old school Labour voters. So David Seymour is definitely trying to harness that, and the bit we didn't really get to with Simon Wilson, but we will in the future, is sort of thinking about how National is tempers that or go or reconciles itself with an ACT party that is full-throatedly this time not just doing the tired libertarian thing, but also basically becoming the party of that sort of racial undercurrent sentiment in New Zealand.
Just grooming myself, bro. Just grooming myself. Something in my beard, I can see it. Yeah, look, I mean, yeah, it's just I have no problems with people's political beliefs and where they want to go and who we're going to vote for. But what I will consistently ask is just be honest. Just be honest. I mean, the other thing is like when it's advantageous, political parties, and I'll say political parties, rather than Seymour, but as an example of Seymour, pick up and choose what they want. So David Seymour is all about smaller government and too much waste within the government, and we shouldn't be spending X amount of money, and there's too much. One of the first thing he wants to do is call a what is it called, a royal commission to look into COVID. The last royal commission, which was only a couple of years ago, was budgeted for $56 million, and they blew through the arse end out of that. Who knows what it cost in the end? $100 million. Now that money is okay to spend because it's a vanity project using buzzwords to get him votes. But other money being spent in other areas, not okay. So he's okay to spend money when he wants it, or it's something that he thinks is, as I said, a vanity project, but something that might get him some votes. But other areas that aren't his constituents, who he thinks his constituents don't want to hear from either, don't spend any money there. Anyway. Hey, we should keep trucking. I think I keep talking about this. We've actually got another story about David Seymour from last night. We didn't do, and we're not going to get to it now because it's not David Seymour FM, although we might get to it later in the week or something about the job he did on a TV3 show over the weekend. Okay, let's have a look at a interview with on Newstalk ZB today with Kerre Woodham and the leader of the opposition. We're going to go through a little bit of this, 4 or 5 little short clips here about what was said, just to see what, the man who would be Prime Minister and the man who may be our next Prime Minister is putting out there now as, ideas around what it's all about. So let's start this conversation when Mr. Luxon was kind of talking about, it's a really interesting statement because it kind of comes across as pro-DHB, because he makes a statement in here about how, there's been a bad job done about breaking up DHB. So how could they do anything? And I hear it as in maybe, and I had to listen to an interview the other day, and there was nothing about, whether National supported or doesn't support DHBs. I suspect they're not fans of DHBs. But there was a conversation about that with Nicola Willis yesterday where it didn't come up. I suspect they're not fans of DHBs. Someone in the chat, if you want to look it up, you can correct me if there's any policy out there at the moment. But when he's talking about how badly the job been done with DHBs, it sounds like to me he's kind of saying we should leave the DHBs alone, we're pro-DHB. Now, that's an assertion from me, I'll make that clear. But we'll have a listen to what he had to say about that and a little bit more about, there's a really interesting point here about spending money and how they spend money, which we'll get to on the back end of this little clip.
Education is one that I'm really worried about. Healthcare is another one. We've got a big focus at the moment on a massive restructure that's costing, it's already $500 million in management consultants and building middle management in Wellington and adding even more bureaucrats to Wellington.
But Rob Campbell says he's dead against that bureaucratic layer and people inventing problems that they will then sell you stuff to solve. Yeah, but here's another example, right? I mean, we had 16 polytechnics in this country. We've merged them all into one several years ago, just in the last 3 or 4 years, and now they're failing. So the government's not going to be able to merge 20 DHBs into a high-functioning, national, integrated system. And
so when I hear that, I think, so therefore the logical conclusion is leave all DHBs alone? Is that a fair conclusion, George, or am I oversimplifying it a bit?
Yeah, but we sort of heard it with Nicola Willis yesterday, right? That National sort of has to, at the same time as, taking the popular road that DHBs need to go, this is sort of common, pretty easy political stance. They also, at the same time, need to critique the reforms that Labour's doing to get rid of the DHBs. So they agree there's a problem, but it's Labor trying to fix the problem. So,
which is your classic.
I think that's what you're hearing there.
It's your classic opposition as well. This is actually not critical. This is just an observation. Opposition parties will always go, they suck, get rid of them, rather than going, we're awesome, put us in. They'll always just try and get you to vote the incumbents out rather than get you to vote them in. I mean, that may become more obvious the closer we get to the election, but at the moment, all of the conversation pretty much is they're terrible, so we should get rid of them. Not we're wonderful, so you should put us in. I'm sure that will come once they start releasing policy, but at the moment, it's just trying to point out what they consider to be all the foibles of the current government. Let's just go on to this bit, because there's a really interesting bit in here about reducing the number of bureaucrats. And Kerre Woodham makes a very, very good point about consultants. And I want you to hear what Mr. Luxon says about the consultants, because she makes a point about you get rid of them all, right? All these, public workers, and then you bring them back on as consultants and they charge more. And Mr. Luxon goes, well, yeah, you do. Like, no big deal. No big deal. You do it. And I just thought, well, that you were acknowledging actually the flaw in your system so flippantly. Let's have a listen.
My view, we're going to spend years managing bureaucracy, building bureaucracy. This government's already added 14,000 bureaucrats into Wellington in less than 4 years. And we're not talking, it's places like education. We spent $5 billion more. We added 1,400 more staff to the Ministry of Education, bringing it up to 4,000 people. We didn't invest it in frontline services of teachers or teacher aides or anything like that. That's just bureaucrats sitting in Wellington at that point.
But then you've got National who gets rid of them, and then you get the consultancy bill going through the roof because you actually need certain people to do certain jobs. If you get rid of them, you just have to hire them back on a higher hourly rate.
Yeah, you do, but you've also got a government that conflates and confuses spending announcements with actually getting things done. And in the middle, or outcomes, and in the middle is something called delivery and execution and implementation. And that's what's incredibly poor here. I mean, that's what I observed in Singapore, was that their public service have really clear targets about what they're there to do. So they're not mucking around doing other things. They're clear about the goals. They then have really clear accountabilities as to who's responsible for delivering it. And then they transparently publish the progress that they're making, good, bad, or otherwise. And so, that's a very simple way to get a public service very focused on outcomes.
So there you go. There's the first one. We're going to move through these quite quickly so you get a chance to hear a lot that was put on. Kerre Woodham in this. The first thing though is, I don't want to sound arrogant, but here's a piece of advice. When you hear any politician say things like 14,000 new bureaucrats, right? The only response from any of us or an interviewer is why? Why was there if that number is accurate, why were there 14,000 bureaucrats put on board? Now, I don't know the answer to that question, so I'm not trying to sell it as a good or a bad. But I would suspect when we had COVID going through the country, that there would have been a lot of people have to have been brought on board to help deal with that. I mean, all of us phones a health line, phones a COVID line, whatever. They're new employments. So when you hear any politician say a number that's bad, the main thing an interviewer should be doing is why were those numbers brought on board? Because again, and not to talk about David Seymour again, but I said this to him, and I've said this to the tax union. This argument about big government versus small government is utter horse shit, right? Big government's not better. Smaller government's not better. Better government is better. And sometimes departments or government agencies need more people, and sometimes they need fewer. So the right in general try to sell the idea of smaller is better. It's not true. Better is better. So was this a need for 14,000 more bureaucrats? I don't know. I would suspect probably not. It's probably overinflated. But what, was 10,000 okay? What was the need there? Why was it there? So big is not better. Small is not better. Better is better. A better functioning government is better. Kerre goes on in this part of the conversation to actually reiterate one of David Seymour's points about National gets in and does nothing. National gets in and actually just continues on Labour's policies and makes no transformative changes.
Well, David Seymour over the weekend too made a point that National just, gets the headlines for saying these policies are wrong. It's all social engineering. Shame on Labour. And then come the glorious day when they become government, they just roll over and keep it there.
Well, I can tell you the situation that I think we're heading into is a turnaround in this country. We've got a great country, but we're not realising our potential economically, socially, and environmentally. So I know when I get there that we'll have to be making some pretty, bold decisions in order to get things done. And so, I'm quite, David can say, I guess, what he wants to say. And I get, he's got a position for his party that he's got to hold to as well. But, what I'd say from my point of view, I'm really clear about how to get things done. I mean, I spent most of my life, turning companies around, sorting things out. And that's what we've got to do when we get to government as well, because literally anything, the economy, cost of living crisis, squeeze middle, healthcare failing, not coping, as the minister says, education, absolute disaster in terms of, you can't get 4 out of 10 kids to school regularly, big problem. Think about law and order, 21% increase in gang crime, violent crime, 45% growth in gangs. So, we've got, and housing, still a major problem.
So again, why 4 out of 10 kids can't get to school? This is a number that Nationals are banging on about at the moment. I don't know the answer to that, be honest, but I do wonder if any of that has to do with COVID as well. I know my 2 children were out of school for about 4 or 5 weeks of the first term by the parents' choice because of COVID. So I do wonder what the analysis is due to COVID and people being out of school over the last couple of years. Because if it's because of COVID, then actually that's not necessarily a bad thing. The other thing I wanted to highlight from this, George, and I'd really like your input on this, is he says, quote, "I've spent most of my life turning companies around," end quote. And that's his premise for running a country. Now just have a think about how a company becomes successful. They typically lower their overheads, and they increase their prices. That's how you get a successful business. If someone's pitch to the country is, "I'm a really good businessman and I've turned companies around," and then you think about things like the fire service, our health system. Remember, there's been in the past, in the 90s, the national government got in and put cash registers in the A&E departments. Think about the libraries, think about the police, think about the things that shouldn't and can't be run like a business. And someone says, "I turn businesses around." I guess all I'm asking is, what does that mean for the country? And what does that mean moving forward with someone who wants to rejuvenate a country as if it was a business?
Yeah, I mean, it means, if we have any assets left, it means selling those off as well, right? That's another big thing about a successful company is selling the company, I imagine. Not that I'm, Luxon, have Luxon's expertise on that, but it does make me nervous after the conversation last night about how we're reaching a sort of tipping point with the economy, that recession is possible, that the housing bubble is, stretched, or it looks like it's ready to just blow up in everyone's faces. How National responds to those things is usually basically to put everything at square one. The little man loses out, and we do the whole big roller coaster up the housing price again. Ready for it all to explode.
One of the people in the comments just said, "I've forgotten what companies did he run again." I'm imagining that's a joke because it's prerequisite to run Air New Zealand if you're going to be the leader of the National Party.
Unilever, wasn't it?
Unilever as well. But I do actually want to highlight one thing as well about Mr. Luxon running running companies. Okay. And this is not to slam him too much, I guess, but it's to put out there. So this is from his Wikipedia page, and I'm perfectly happy. And this is all public knowledge. So I'm not, some people read Wikipedia as sort of not a very good source of information. This is pretty well documented. He turned, he says he turned Air New Zealand around, but Air New Zealand made record profits while he was there, etc., etc., etc. But this is the part about how he ran that business. In February 2021, it was revealed that while Luxon was CEO of Air New Zealand, its contracting business unit, Gas Turbines, was assisting Royal Saudi Navy vessels, despite them blocking essential supplies like water, food, medical assistance from Yemen. Luxon claimed to have no recollection of it, and that it might have postdated my time. It didn't. The latter claim being disputed by his successor, Greg Foran. It was met with criticism from the Prime Minister and the Greens Human Rights Party, Gulriz Gulman. Luxon later admitted Air New Zealand not having a process where its chief executive would be told about all military contracts was a mistake. So that, I mean, like, you know, not to be too snarky about it, it's a pretty uncomfortable some aspects of running a business when you've got to make decisions based on money. If it's purely a money-driven decision, sometimes you can get into bed with some pretty ugly, you know, workmates.
Yeah, I'd love for a journalist to dig more into his time. He mentioned in his speech when he became leader his time in Russia. It doesn't mention there in Wikipedia, but he was talking about how I've seen socialism and what it was like. And if you look at when he was actually in Russia, he was there in the 90s when, you know, Russia was getting basically, you know, virtually and literally, you know, strip mined of assets by Western companies. And I'm sure he was in the vanguard of that capitalist invasion. But, you know, I think that I'm scared of them doing something outside of the box, like they privatize dock or something, right? And they spin it as some sort of like green thing, you know, they're like, we're privatizing conservation, this sort of stuff, right? Because I mean, you know, we don't have the rail system to sell anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's the point is when your selling point is I've turned businesses around, in my mind at least, and look, if I'm being fair to Mr. Luxon, I'll say time will tell when he unpacks it a bit more, but I think about someone who's doing things primarily for a return to like a financial return to an investor or a shareholder. Now, he may argue that it's a lifestyle return to the public of New Zealand might be the same thing, but I guess that's what I want to have unpack a bit more, because all I can think about with businesses is the financial aspect of it and how to make the most amount of profit with the least amount of cost. And that doesn't sound good, for example, if you think about health systems or schools, for example, at the same time as saying he wants a world-class schooling system. Well, that's going to take a lot of money to put into, and it's not a very good business model. Schools aren't. So anyway, he's talked a bit about the difference between Labour and National. Kerry Woodham went on to talk about how actually Labour's trying to do some of the things and has tried to do some of the things that National's talking about. So aren't they kind of the same? And you can hear in this response his pushback to what David Seymour has been saying over the weekend, which is how National and Labour are very similar and they don't really do anything. And I think you can hear it in this conversation. But I think also you can hear words that are now being used by National, and we know about the squeezed middle, we know all those sorts of things, but there's a new word that's coming out that's not really a part of New Zealand culture. See if you can pick up on it, George, to do with beneficiaries. That's not a part of New Zealand culture. It's not really a word we use. It's an international word, and I think it has harsher connotations than to say a beneficiary or someone in need. And it's a word that National is floating around at the moment, and I'm wondering if it's just because he spent time in America and it's a part of his vernacular, or it's actually trying to demonize a sector of society a bit more.
So, they believe what you believe. It's just a different way of getting outcomes.
They don't believe what we believe at all. What they believe is, we've got a situation now, if you just think about welfare, we've spent $8 billion more. We've added 2,500 more bureaucrats into Wellington in the MSD, and we've actually got 53,000 more people on a job seeker benefit today at a time of 3.2% unemployment and massive labour shortages. So they are not serious about moving people from welfare into work, which is the way in which you get dignity and the way that a life actually, it gives life huge dignity as work. So, we've got to work much, much harder in a very targeted way to say, right, hang on, there's rights and responsibilities to all this deal. We believe in you, but we believe in the safety net. We get all of that, but we've also got to help you get out of this, because sitting on welfare for the rest of your life is a waste. It's not a great pathway to prosperity.
What do you think, George? Did you pick up on the word that I was hinting at? Welfare. We don't use that phrase in New Zealand, I don't think. I think welfare has much different connotations to benefit or beneficiaries. I do. I really do.
I thought you meant prosperity.
Well, that probably goes back to his evangelical days a little bit. But no, I was thinking the word welfare. For me, maybe it's my own thing. And I said I'm happy to say that maybe I'm over analyzing it, but it just feels like it's a different word. And it feels like that perhaps it's got I don't know if I can say slightly more menacing. I don't want to be a drama queen, but different undertone. Tell me in the chat, enough people are watching now. Does welfare sound worse to you than, for example, beneficiary? Like, does it sound like a more loaded word? To me, it does, but I'm happy to say, okay, no, it's just me. So tell me in the chat.
Even beyond that, he was saying that you can't have dignity on welfare, right? The language that he was saying, just straight up assuming that if you're on the dole, then that means what did he say? You're going to sit on welfare till the day you die or something like that. You don't have dignity. I'm someone who's, on a benefit, and, I feel pretty fucking pretty dignified. I'm not too worried, Christopher. I'm pretty sweet as well. Also, I'm not sure where he got his stats for the MSD staff, because I'm pretty sure the latest ones say they've added 1,000, and during COVID, surprise, Ministry of Social Development. So yeah, bit of a fact check there.
A lot of people in the chat not thinking they see it as I say it. So someone says that seems more American. But look, I'm just saying, it's something I thought today. If I'm wrong, happy to admit it. I have other clips, but I'm going to play this last one. It's very, very quick. And then if you went with it at the start of the show, I'm going to show you something that we've already showed you once in this episode, but I think it's worth seeing. Christopher Luxon talking about charter schools.
Your ideas on that?
Yeah, so first and foremost, big fan of charter schools. Think it's an excellent way forward, and it's a real shame the government overturned it, because that's what I was talking about before. One system, an education system that has enough innovation and components in it, whether you want to have a charter school based off military principles, sporting principles, whatever it is. I just came back from the UK.
That'll do. So he considers having charter schools to be one education system, but I think he and ACT, and I'll say National, don't consider having a Māori Health Authority being a part of one health system. So in my mind, charter schools can be outside the education system. Then how is that any different from having an additional health system? Just bringing this quote up again, if you weren't here at the start. The first quote here, are we really saying that there are two types of New Zealanders with completely different health needs, two parallel healthcare systems? Was David Seymour on Newstalk ZB. What was not David Seymour, not on Newstalk ZB, was me putting in a different word there, and putting the different word, rather than having two different health needs as two different education needs. That's charter schools, and he supports that. That's the Māori Health Authority, and he doesn't. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any logical sense to me. All right. Is there anything you want to add about that, George? Because I know we're about to wrap up. I'm going to do one other thing probably by myself to do with and that. But is there anything you want to add to that before you shoot off?
Nope. That's all good. I'll see you folks tomorrow, and thanks for the engagement in the chat. It's been entertaining as well.
Yeah. Cool, man. Hey, we'll catch up with you another day. George has got to shoot off because he's got other things on. But as he goes off, Heidi, mate, see you later.
Yep.
We are going to continue on very quickly. Just you and me in there. Thanks, Georgie. There's a bunch of texts coming in at the moment. Actually, some comments here becoming. Take money from public schools, pour money into charter schools, blast the failure of public schools, shut it down, and education privatized. Job done. New Zealand isn't big enough to keep splitting the funding and the additional costs, etc. Create the gap between work and welfare, from Jenny Shipley. Military principles, that's talking about the charter schools. And then a bunch of you, actually, it's not totally skew with myself, but people talking about welfare queens and talking about, it was called social welfare. And so fair enough. Okay. Maybe that's just me. How do I turn that one off? There you go. And I was just thinking about it. It didn't, we all have different words that we use, and it didn't sound like one to me. Now, this last part of the conversation is just me and you, and it's really talking to people about something that Tova O'Brien did yesterday. She had a commentary, and it was basically what it was literally. I think things even called there literally. It's easy to blame the messenger if your side is losing. Now, it's a very simple concept that I've experienced this. Most people who have worked in news media have experienced this. When you offer an opinion on something, immediately you are well, if the opinion is negative towards a side of the political spectrum, then you're a mouthpiece for the other side, no matter what. Now, many of us have offered perspectives on that both criticize the political spectrum and also congratulate the political spectrum over time. Maybe not every night. Obviously, tonight it hasn't really been that flattering on this show to do with National and ACT or David Seymour, but over the space of we're coming up to our 100th episode Monday week. Over the space of that whole time, we have talked both positively and negatively about all of the political parties. However, if your side is losing, as Tova O'Brien says, it's easy to shoot the messenger. In other words, if you are not in the position of power and people criticize your party, the ones that aren't in power, it's easy to think that the person criticizing them is just a mouthpiece of the government. I'll just play some more now and you'll hear what Tova's got to say about the situation.
Beleaguered National Party leaders, all of them, used to be convinced that the press gallery, collectively, and particular journalists within it, were personally invested in taking them out. That there was this left-wing agenda to wreak havoc on the right and stir up the proverbial within their caucus. Simon Bridges even dedicated precious time in his valedictory speech to deliver a parting message to the press gallery saying, "Your most important job is to hold the powerful to account, and let me give you a clue, it's the government that has the power." Former leader Judith Collins used to say the same thing. She often made it personal, saying that journalists, including myself, were obsessed with her. She was rolled pretty shortly after saying things along those lines. But these leaders, they genuinely thought they were under personal attack. When I was political editor, Bridges once called a meeting with my bureau chief, with my boss, to lay a formal complaint that I had a vendetta to, quote, take him down. Another side note to illustrate my noise cancelling point, I had a similar, though not quite so conspiratorial, complaint from the Prime Minister's office soon after. But what those national leaders failed to recognise was it was not the media driving that narrative, as they called it, but dissenters within their own parties. Most days, national MPs would be talking to us about the failings of their leader. So it was national MPs driving it, and we were covering it because caucus unity is a massive news story. A dysfunctional opposition is a massive story. Oppositions are governments in waiting. If they don't work properly, democracy doesn't work properly. At the time, there was just as much reporting on national party disunity as there was with government botch-ups, COVID testing botch-ups, border botch-ups, police failings, Oranga Tamariki failings, Ministry of Education failings, immigration anomalies. There was so much critical government reporting on the news every single night that often had national MP voices included, but which national leaders and party supporters could not see. It was in their blind spot. All they saw were the stories, and yes, they ran most nights too, of their leadership under attack, their party in disarray.
There you go. So, and I think it's a really fair and accurate point that Tova is making. And, as I say, everyone who's done any kind of, public job, job in the public face to do any kind of commentary or conversation around it will get accused of it. I've got articles still online being written about me as a right-wing conservative pundit, and it's anyone who knows me. In fact, there's people watching right now who know me they would make them laugh, because and I can tell you what the story was as well. There was a story where I didn't support the Ports of Auckland Union because I thought that the way they were going about things was wrong and what they were asking for was wrong. So in that instance, I didn't support them. An article written about me that said I was a right-wing conservative Christian fundamentalist. However, the problem is, months before that, I'd supported the teachers' unions against. I'm just trying to think of the name of the system. There was a new system coming in for marking children. The name eludes me right now. But I wrote in support of the teachers' union. So much so that the teachers' union used it. I was national standards. That's right. Used it on their front page of their website. So in that instance, I supported the union's call, right? And I was a massive lefty. In that instance, I said, well, for me personally, I don't think this is right what this union's doing. And then I was a right-wing fundamentalist. So, and I make it clear, I've got no kind of profile or nothing like that to like what Tova's talking about. Well, what I'm saying is, if you raise your head and say or do anything, especially if you're someone who kind of calls each each piece on its merit. I'll tell you this as well. I'm left wing, right? Let's make that clear in case you're unclear on that. I think that I can probably affect a change in left wing policy and left wing ideas because we're akin. So actually, I feel like I would be better served to be harsh on the left and pointing out where their holes are to further a left wing agenda that I want to be a part of. Me shouting at the right, national act, maybe we're doing it as a comment, but that's never going to affect a change. There's nothing there. No David Seymour and ACT and national, they're never going to listen to anything we've got to say here. Mind you, we're so small that no one's going to listen, but at some point if we weren't, but actually I have relationships with people who are in left-wing politics, nothing personal, nothing close or friends or anything like that, but actually there's probably, if I was able to offer some ideas for directional change, it would be in the left, not the right. So actually I might be able to affect a change on the left. And I think that offering valid criticism on the left is a good thing to do. So actually, the idea of being left-wing, so you're always attacking the right, it's not how I think. I think left-wing is actually pointing out the foibles of the left to make the left stronger is better than just attacking the right all the time, because that's not going to do anything at all. I think that the same could be said for the right. You know, right commentators who are pointing out the foibles of the right to make the right better. There's an old adage about iron sharpening iron is actually a better thing. And I've said it to several people this week. We're ardently, we'll wear it on our sleeve. We're from the left. There's no question, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And if the left requires criticism, we'll criticize. And if the right requires praise, we'll praise. Super simple. All right, this finishes up the last part of this conversation as to why these little leadership things aren't news stories at the moment and why National is currently, and Luxon in particular, is not complaining to the bosses of the journalists about the journalists in Parliament at the moment. So that's not happening now. It was happening for the previous two leaders. It's not happening now. Why?
Christopher Luxon isn't doing media rounds saying that journalists are obsessed with him or too focused on his party at the expense of the government. He doesn't need to, because he plugged the leaks. National MPs have now, after 5 years in opposition, finally got in line. And when the polls hurt one side of politics over another, political reporting colours between the lines. It helps us understand why. It's easy to blame the messenger if you feel your side is losing. The truth can be harder to accept.
Bingo. There you go. I think we're just about done for the night. It's been good to be with you. Thank you for the text messages and stuff that have been coming in. What are we at? We're at about 11:11. Remember as well, if you are, God, I nearly said something disgusting. I was going to say, if you're a fan of the show, no. If you enjoy what we do, if you like the content and you want to, make sure you don't miss some of our insightful and wonderful commentary, then actually we do an audio podcast now. It's exactly the same as the show. I don't know what tonight's show is going to sound like because we had to have Simon on the phone, which was the first because of a technical glitch. I'm sure it'll be fine. But every night when I get off the air, I upload the audio podcast to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify as well. We're also now on Rover. If you don't know what Rover is, we're not affiliated with MediaWorks, ROVA. Let me find it. I'll see if I can. Good radio. I thought we're not doing radio, are we? We go podcasts. So it's best to find them on on their app. But if you go into Rover, which is the MediaWorks podcast platform, I guess. If you go into Rover, you can also find us in there. Did I skip past? There's one that's called News, I think. True Crime. Oh, there we go. News and related podcasts. So obviously Rover puts all their stuff up first. We're not affiliated with them. They put up other people's things and we'll be in there somewhere, probably very last because we've only just gone on. So you can find us every day on here. There we are, right there. Click on there. And there's a bunch of our stuff. Oh, maybe. I don't know. Live stream there. I don't know. Anyway. So we're on Rover as well. So we're on those podcasts going along the bottom, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Just look up #BHN and you'll find us. And that gets uploaded straight after the show. So, if you're someone who gets some of the show, some of the time, half of the show, especially if you're in an area where you drive to work, I always like listening to podcasts when I'm in the car. One of the things about moving to Dunedin is you don't drive anywhere long enough. It's everywhere 12 minutes, so it's harder to listen to a podcast. You can't charge your phone in the car either. A tip for people moving to Dunedin, right? You got to be better with charging your phone because you don't have a 45-minute drive home where you can get 80% charge to your phone. It's just one of the, and they don't like steak, cheese, pies down here for some reason. Steak and cheese. Everyone's mince and cheese in the bottom of the South Island. I'm not really sure about that. Thanks, Pat and George. Grease up, John. Here we go. Except the right never critique the Dems and are always fighting amongst themselves, and the right just walk all over them. And Ludwig has made me an offer. If I make him press secretary, I'll put on clean tracksuit pants. You mean you'll put them on me? Because if you put them on me, that might be interesting. Don't know. All right. So if you want to have a look at us on the audio podcast, that's up there. And what I was going to say is, if you're a driver in the morning, like you drive to work or you catch a bus or whatever, then it's in your device every single night before midnight, and you can pick up on it tomorrow morning and check out anything that you may have missed. All right, guys. Hey, thanks for tonight. Hopefully you got some of that. Apologies again about the technical glitch with Simon, but we got his commentary in there, which was the most important part. Hopefully that was okay from your side of things. And other than that, I think we're done. My dog's not here. Don't know where my dog is tonight. I think the kids are here, you see, so the dog's not, because there's more fun people in the house. All right, be safe. We'll see you tomorrow night. Wear your mask. Oh, yeah, COVID update. Still negative, even though it was exposed on Sunday morning. But I think tomorrow morning is going to be the actual final time, because that's going to be 3 full days after exposure. So we'll see. Planning on being here tomorrow night. If I'm not, Facebook page is the place to find out about it. And other than that, we'll catch you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Hooroo.